Hello there and welcome to You Talking to Me. 28, this is the current numbers of countries within the European Union. Before 2004, 15 members were composed by the European Union. Were decisions for all Europe easier to reach at that time? And the rift widened today between the Western and the Eastern countries on the refugees crisis, to take one example, has put back on the table the question, is the EU at 28 still manageable? And that's the discussion we will have today with two members of the European Parliament, Mr. Joe Leinen, you're a German member of the Socialist and Democrats group. Hello.
Hello.
And Mr. Dariusz Rosati, you're a Polish member of the European People's Party, the centre-right group. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, both of you, and welcome. So, reaching a common agreement between 28 member states is becoming more and more difficult. As we see at the last Council of Ministers, a consensus is really hardly possible, and the option of a qualified vote, majority vote, is often chosen. So, for example, on the refugees quotas and also on the emission trade system related to the environment issue. So, Mr. Leinen, this is how can you explain these difficulties?
No, I see no major difficulty to all the time in the EU. Decision making was always difficult, but of course with 28 it would be impossible to vote by unanimity. Thanks God we have a lot of majority voting, qualified majority. And at the end, this is the rule, this is the normal rule in the EU to decide. And as you see, it works. It has some hurdles and some problems, but it can work.
Mr. Rosati, a qualified vote majority is even better than a consensus, or can you explain this difference?
Well, it's definitely more practical. If you are 28 member states, then it is obvious that there are different positions, there are different national interests, and we need a mechanism that would allow us still to take decision in view of this diversity. And if there are few member states, just 3, 5, 6, then perhaps unanimity is the right way. But when we have 28 member states, we have to resort to qualified majority voting. Of course, this refers to certain areas. There's a majority of policies, of EU policies, where we decide already with qualified majority. And we have to admit that sometimes we are against some decisions, but in the name of being together, in the name of solidarity, we have to simply accept this.
So we have a recorded question from RTV Slo. So it's a Slovenian member. It's a question from Lydia. We listen.
Hi, everyone. Well, when we're speaking about the EU being difficult to manage, we cannot overlook the fact that the 28-member family suffers from conceptual weakness and a lack of political vision when it comes to managing fears and panic. Looking for solutions to the current refugee crisis, of course, being one area where this is very much evident. One example, the fact that Hungary took matters into its own hands, dismissing calls for European unity, is very worrisome. How do you think we should cure this obviously broken EU spirit? Any concrete steps suggested or planned in the near future, as well as in the long run? Thank you.
Mr. Leinen, any ideas?
Lydia is perfectly right that we have a lack of vision for the European Union, and we have different concepts of cooperating or integrating Europe. Look on Great Britain, they want to go out. Look on Cameron and Orban, he doesn't want to follow EU values. But I think the fundamental core of what keeps us together are the values of solidarity, of unity and diversity, of respecting human rights and democracy. And the EU is a house under construction. We have some floors that are not well constructed, where we are struggling. But others, we have already the solid fundament on which we will continue to work together in Europe.
Mr. Rosati, do you have this feeling that Western country thinks that the European Union is acting as a diktat for Europe, and then we have in the other part the Western countries who just acting with arrogance?
No, I don't have this kind of feeling. I have no sense of inferiority within Eastern Europe vis-à-vis the Western Europe. I don't think these accusations are correct. I mean, as I said, there are different visions, there are different concepts of how the Europe should work together, and therefore we have different opinions. The migrant crisis or the refugee crisis hit Europe as a surprise to some extent. We indeed, we haven't had a long-term vision of how to deal with this the crisis, so we had to react to this immediate threats of inflows of refugees. That was the reason for some countries. Some countries felt insecure in this situation because they felt that they are asked to accept refugees actually without having a chance to address the source of the problem, which lies outside of the EU. But now I think that we are coming slowly to a consensus that we have to address the issues, the foundation of the problem, right? Not only the symptoms, which is the inflow of refugees. We have to do something together, and then probably we also can tackle the refugees in our borders.
Let's go back to the decision process. So we have a comment on Facebook. So Alexander wonders whether it would be better to replace unanimity and qualified majority by a single majority within the EU Council and Council of Ministers. And he also asked, would it be better to give more power to the Commission and the Parliament, who are representing the citizens, and less power to the institutions representing the states? Mr. Leinen, this is a reform that we could think of?
Yeah, indeed, the community method has proven to be the most democratic and the most efficient. Community method means that the European Commission has the authority to make proposals, legislative proposals and others. And then the European Parliament, together with the Council, can decide by majority. That's the best. We have seen in the financial crisis that the government shifted from the community method to the intergovernmental method, where they need consensus, and where they don't have consensus, they have to go to smaller part of countries. So let's say it's not the European capital, Brussels, but it is then Berlin, Paris or London that are deciding, or others. And in fact, we should stick to giving more power to the European institutions and to the community method.
Okay, Mr. Rosati, will reforming the institution means reforming the Commission, for example, one commissioner, one country?
Well, I wanted to say that I agree broadly with what Mr. Leinen has said on this great value we should attach to the community method, because this is the Commission and the community method which represent the interest of Europe as a whole. But at the same time, we have to admit that there are different areas of competences. We have some competences that are European Union competences, like trade policy or agricultural policy or some other things. But we still have important areas that remain within the remits of national governments. Yeah. We cannot replace governments in taking decisions in those particular areas. So we have to live with the two methods. That is one thing. On the reform of the Commission, I think indeed the Commission is
in which category you put immigration?
Well, in fact, we had agreed before that this is a shared competence of the EU and member states. That is, we can decide there in that area with the qualified majority. But apparently, and all member states, they finally agreed, even though they had different opinions, right? They finally agreed. But if we speak about this community method, then we should also take into account the fact that the compromise has been the defining word of European cooperation. We should not resort immediately to voting, especially majority voting, in order to avoid a situation in which a smaller group of countries is left outside. We should try whatever we can to have a consensus and to somehow take into account the position of the minority as well.
So we have another comment on Facebook. Valérie Xavier wrote that the EU is more diverse than before, but nothing in the institutional framework of the EU has been done for better integration. He added that the Council remains a diplomatic style and not a democratic framework. And we have also, related to the solution to unite the EU members, we have a recorded question from Claudia, from AMS, our German member.
Hello, everybody. My question is, we in Germany, with 16 federal states, we are somehow familiar with controversial discussions, blocking laws in the Bundesrat and other things. But nevertheless, we are together under one government, and of course we are regarding ourselves as Germans. Meanwhile, I should add. So could a European government help to unite the states of Europe better?
A single government will help, Mr. Leinen?
Yeah, of course. I think we are going towards a political union. So a political union needs an executive called government, needs a parliament called European Parliament. And since we have a double legitimacy, Europe of states and Europe of citizens, we have as well the Council. But I agree, more and more we need Europe, and we need a leadership in Europe, and that must come from a sort of executive, and that is not the Council, that should be the Commission.
Yeah, but let's be realistic. I mean, some members would never accept to lose their sovereignty and be
I wouldn't use the word never. I mean, Germany has been a federal state since for 150 years, right? Almost, right? So it has developed this tradition or this habit of compromising on many issues. Europe is the process in the construction still. Probably a single government for Europe. Europe is still too early to
Poland could accept
project. At this moment of time, I think we have a situation. Well, institutions should be a reflection of popular convictions. This is not something which can be imposed from the upper level. We have to work in order to gradually develop the sense of European identity and the sense of European solidarity. And as a reflection of this process should be new institutions that would emerge. But for the time being, I think we have the project of building a political union, but this is a long-term project, of course. And as you said, perhaps not all the member states will be participating in this.
Right. Actually, related to this European government, we go to your country with a last recorded question from our partner, Polskie Radio. From Joachim, we listen.
For a long time, we have observed that Europe cannot speak with one voice. A lack of solidarity and a common policy is significantly delaying the decision-making process of the Union. In light of this, is it still realistic to create a so-called United States of Europe?
Mr. Leinen.
Yeah, the European integration is a dialectic process. You have steps backwards, but then you have again 2 steps forward. And every big crisis is crying for more Europe. And you had the financial crisis, we get now a sort of economic and fiscal union. You have the refugee crisis, we need more foreign and security policy, we need more immigration and asylum policy. Other crises and challenges will come. So I agree with the member who asked the question.
Joachim.
Yes, the United States of Europe is my vision, and it might call itself European Union. It will not be the same as the United States of America, but it will be a political union, or it will not keep together, it will fall apart.
Mr. Rosati, that will be your
It is a process. It is a process. I'm also disappointed by the inability of Europe to speak in one voice in areas such as relations with Russia, Ukrainian crisis, the Middle East crisis. Indeed, we still have the situation where national interests, narrowly defined, they still take the upper hand in many cases. But we are moving forward. I mean, we have built already a union which is much more integrated than it used to be 10, 20 or 30 years ago. There are new areas of common decision making. And I think there is more and more understanding that in future, if Europe is to survive, it has indeed integrate much closer and establish this kind of political union. I don't know, again, this is United States or not, but definitely we'll have to work much more closely if we want to face the challenges of the contemporary world.
So, Mr. Leinen, your last word for this discussion. So, was Europe easier at that time than we were 15 members or not?
Jean Monnet was already saying in the 50s, Europe will not come with one big bang, but step by step. And I think he was right. If you look back, Europe has integrated much more than any region in the world. And the pressure on Europe is so big and so manifold that I'm sure if we come back in 5 years, we will have more Europe and more European unity than today.
Thank you both for coming, and
much.
thank you for watching us. See you next time. Bye.